Our next speaker is someone who contributed to shattering a stereotype that I have. And that is, I've spent some unpleasant period of my career fighting with chemical abstracts over their desire to sort of lock up chemistry literature. And out of that experience, I came to think that there's a revolution going on in open access, and then somewhere over here there's the chemists. And that's the way I thought the world was wired. I was delighted to come to the University of Oklahoma and to have an opportunity to meet a colleague, Mark Morvant. Mark is the executive director of the Center for Teaching Excellence. He's also associate professor of chemistry and biochemistry here at the University of Oklahoma. And he's one of the leaders of the One University Digital Initiative on the OU campus. He has been, I would say, quite passionate and aggressive in the best way in terms of looking at questions about how can we think as a university, how can we think about trying to lower the cost of textbooks and get faculty involved and engaged in that process, and what's needed in order to make that happen. So I'm very delighted that Mark has been able to make some time and to join us today. Mark, thanks.
All right. So I appreciate the invitation, Dean Luce, to come out and talk to you. There's lots of things going on in STEM with open access. As Heather talked about, right, we've got this proclamation from the president, and that's going to affect NSF and NIH and all the way down the road. I'm coming from this from a teaching standpoint, so I can address a little bit, but I'm not the expert on what's going to be happening to STEM as far as research publications. But I think when we're thinking about teaching, one of the things that I think about when I look at that is I look at my examples, and I look at what we think about as far as open when we're talking about instruction. If you look at any instructor, they are openly adopting anything they've seen. Because the first thing they do when they go in the classroom is they model the behavior they've seen of their instructors. So the idea of open access or adopting an adaptation that you would see in an open access format is just the nature of instruction. My dad was a faculty member, and his adage was, teaching should be fun. After teaching my first 2 years, I added to his proclamation, my little corollary, if it isn't fun, you got to change something. My first institution was at the Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. At Texas A&M University Corpus Christi, we're in South Texas. It was an island university, a beautiful place, but we had students that were coming from a very, very poor background as far as their math and even reading. Our SAT scores were, to say the least, pathetic. But because we were a 65% Hispanic university, the goal was that every student was going to be able to graduate. General chemistry, as Rick pointed out, is a big stopper, right? And if we think about what needs to happen in STEM, we need diversity in STEM. That means we need access in STEM. It did not work that only 65% of my students were making it through general chemistry, their first semester. That means right off the bat, we've culled 35% of a pool of 65% diverse population. So we're looking at innovations. One of the things that drives innovative faculty nuts is the fact that we're often limited by the available textbooks and the resources there. The time commitment it takes to create these from scratch is overwhelming. If we look at general chemistry, at the time this occurred, when I was looking at making an innovation, 1998, there were really one major model. The one model was the classic model. Why? That's what everybody wanted to buy. If you looked at the market at that time for textbooks, almost everybody taught in a classic model. Now, did that make any pedagogical sense? Well, let's think about the classical model. Classical model started with thermodynamics. Then you went to reactions, and then about after 5 weeks, they told you what an atom was. Why classical? That's how chemistry was discovered. First, they were able to figure out the thermodynamics, how much heat this gave off, how much it took to freeze that, this measurement, that measurement. And then they were able to go, oh, if I put A with B, it becomes C. It wasn't until the 1930s and 40s that they really figured out the whole bonding theory of a molecule. So if you look at a classic textbook, which was the predominant textbook in the 90s, it was based off of not a pedagogically sound fashion, but what everybody wanted, and it was based off of a historical model of how chemistry was discovered. A new model was just coming out at that time, which was atom first. Luckily, atom first is now the predominant model of textbooks. There, you start with an atom. If we're going to build a house, do we want to start with the roof or the foundation? Foundation. You start with the atom and you build on it. It's a very good system, but it also incorporates mathematics right up front. At Corpus Christi, with the students we had, I had a population of students that did not have the mathematical ability to excel in that course. That didn't mean they couldn't learn chemistry. That just meant I needed more time to teach them the mathematics. So I started thinking, if we could separate the concept and calculations, if I could teach them the concepts of chemistry without having them to do the calculations of chemistry, then we could do it. I could get them into their first math class. When they hit me in the spring, we can get them through this. We're gonna succeed. Uh-oh, no textbook. Nothing out there to support this. Try to do that with a regular textbook and tell the students ignore the mathematics until we get their next math semester. It's not gonna work. Well, luckily, there was one Maverick textbook that was custom published, right? Enabled me to then try this. They did it for a whole different reason. What they were looking for was a way at North Carolina State so that they could have not multiple formats of their course, but they could have the concepts. And then if you were going in engineering, you would take this semester. If you were going into health sciences, you go here. If you're going chemistry, you would go there, right? So they used it for a whole different system, but it was out there and it was available and it was custom published, right? Simple black and white, cost $27 each one. I say one Maverick textbook, but there was actually two. One Maverick author, right, decided to do this and create this. That enabled me to change to a concept calculation. I went from about 60% success rate from Gen Chem 1 to Gen Chem 2 to 85%. It's an innovative curriculum that could only been enabled with the course materials there. Without those course materials, I would have had to have stayed in one of the other two formats. This is the first thing that really opened my eyes to open access publishing and the power that open access publishing can have. The next one is the multiplication effect. And I better hit the second button so you can see this quickly. The goal here really was to enhance the students' learning by giving them my lectures on podcasts. Podcasts were just becoming popular, 2005. I wanted to podcast all my lectures so that the students could have that. So, you know, if they missed something, they could go back and review. It didn't help with my handwriting. I still wrote freehand, and that's why I'm not freehanding it today. And I wanted to do this for 300 students, right? So for my class of 300 students, we're going to put all of my lectures as podcasts. They can download them at any time. Okay, what happens when you do that? You put something out there for anybody to use. In 11 months, I had 4,507 subscribers and 22,000 views. In the next 2 years, the views were over 65,000. Started to see links to podcasts posted on university course sites across the US and in other countries. From the analytics, was able to see that people were using this across the country. The analytics in 2008 weren't as advanced as they are now, so I couldn't really see how much time they were spending on videos, but I could see how much time that IP address was linked on. And what I saw was they were on there 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes. These students were watching the whole video, watching parts of these videos, right? And then this one shocked some of my colleagues. I've got all these analytics. If we look at the normal index rate for publications, it may be cited 4 or 5 times in science. That means you may have had hundreds of people reading it, and you had 4 or 5 people that cited it. But the analytics of these open access are significant. We're talking tens of thousands of students that I had a direct impact, not including those students that reached out and contacted me to say, thank you. Professor X was not doing the job, and you're the only way I passed this class, right? So there's a multiplication effect when we look at open access. What I spend my time and effort on does not only impact my 300 students, or my 600 students, or my 1,000 students, but can impact tens of thousands of students. The next one's kind of a sad story and really led to the passion that I have now for it. The $252 textbook. I adopted a new textbook. My colleagues got together on the committee. We looked at it. We discussed it. It had the most innovative problem-solving strategy we had seen in about 12 years in publishing. Of the textbooks out there, almost all of them were the same. They all followed the same pattern, but this one had something innovative about it. It was going to change the way our students could learn. Our students couldn't afford it. The bookstore was telling us, nobody's buying the book. We've got all these books. What's your enrollment? It's $252. Well, there's other options. The book, they tell you when they come to your office, they tell you there's all kinds of options. What were the options? $252 for the new book, a bargain at $189. And if you want the digital, $90. And that's a rental. And sadly, it's only 2 semesters worth. It's not only 360 days, it's 2 semesters. You may not know, but most people don't pass organic chemistry their first time. Okay. It was almost useless to get it. We saw almost no adoptions of the digital because the students found no value in it. They found value in the other copies, but the price was so high, most of them had to pool together. I had students that had 1 copy they had to share. This is not access to learning. This is not what STEM needs to move that forward. So what can we do about that? Well, I've already pointed out here some of the reasons for faculty to adopt open educational resources, or at least my experience with that. Increasing cost of textbooks. The $252 textbook was the one that did it for me. Before that, the textbook was $180. Went from $180 one year to $252 the next year. Turns out that most of the organic chemistry textbooks are in that range now, the $250 range. They went from when I started being about $100 to $130 to $150 to $180, and then the $70 jump makes no sense to me, but they're all in that mid-200 range. So we see a huge increase in these costs. An 8.1 increased textbook. Now, what does that compare to what the University of Oklahoma is trying to do to increase access? We are doing everything we can to keep tuition rates low. Last year, we did everything we could to keep the tuition rates at 3%. We're trying to make access to students open. What are the textbook publishers doing and doing to my STEM students that need access? They're decreasing the chance that they can actually afford that resource that will enable them to succeed. But there's also other advantages, right? Integration of media and interactive in courses. Talked to a publisher last week. Sadly, a publisher that I'd worked here for years. 6 years ago, I said it would be great if you had interactive videos, or at least videos, that we could put in our content or we could send our students to. In our conversation when I was telling them, sorry, I've digitized my book, we're going open access, they were like, but we can do X, Y, Z. I said, when? And they said, next fall. I said, sorry, you're 6 years too late. Some of the things that can really enhance education, we can put into our course materials to help our students, right? What I saw from the publishers, and again, from a faculty member standpoint, they weren't giving me what was going to be beneficial to my students. What they were doing was what was best for their business. And some of these things, with their amount of resources, they could have been doing where a single faculty member at one university could not. Ability to customize the course materials to the curriculum. I lucked out and I found one innovative textbook that allowed me to do something that made the difference in the lives of students in South Texas, a population that needed it, first-generation Hispanic students. With open access educational resource materials, especially the innovations that have come around in the last couple of years, we have things that faculty can adopt and adapt to meet their idea of what the pedagogical goals are. They don't have to start from scratch, right? And they don't have to just get lucky. I got lucky. We now are getting to the point where there's enough materials out there where faculty can actually create the courses that they think will make their students succeed. Update the material when necessary, not based on a 3-year edition cycle. Every 3 years, I had to change things. One of the textbooks, I used 4 out of its 6 editions. They kept splitting the chapters. They take chapter 12 and 13 and make it 13, 14, 15. Then the next edition, back to 12 and 13, then 13, 14, 15. All that did was cause me hours and hours of work every time a new edition came out. No educational value, nothing I could do for the students to help them, right? It was just irritating, right? The truth is, in that time period, and it went over 15 years, there were 2 major changes, 2 reactions. I could have handed out a piece of paper that had those 2 reactions in it. Now, that's my field, right? Organic chemistry does change. These 2 reactions were very important. I would have included them if I could have included them. But there are other fields, right, where a 3-year rotation cycle isn't enough, right? You need to get it out when it changes. You change the nutrition pyramid, guess what, when you need that? Now, not tomorrow, not the next edition. You know, it changes on Friday, I need it on Monday for the class, right? And with some of the things we're able to do now as faculty with open access, those things are now enabled. Now, when we look at innovations open access, of course, we have the long established open educational resources, Merlot and Connections. Lots of great resources. As I heard a colleague call this, they call it OER 1.0, right? These are hard to find. There's lots of resources in there, but as far as an R1 faculty member being able to utilize these resources, it's very time dependent. You have to go through and sift through thousands and thousands of potentially great activities, resources, print, video, before you find what's good. What we look with the turnkey solution, and this one came out, that released 2 of their books in the last summer, was OpenStax. OpenStax is actually part of Connections. And what they're doing there is trying to produce turnkey solutions for faculty. So for faculty, it's creating a textbook in a format that they're normally used to seeing a textbook. Not multiple sections, not all black and white without print. It looks like a textbook, and the quality of it is the same or better than what you're seeing from the publishers. But that's not the only thing. If I'm teaching 300 students, I not only need a textbook, I need the support. And one of the things that they're doing that I think is very beneficial, especially for large adoptions at universities, is they are partnering with the providers of online resources. Right? So if I'm in my class and I have 300, 400, 500, I need an online homework system. The publishers have locked that up. In fact, some of the most innovative online providers of homework and other resources for faculty were just bought up last summer, okay? So, but OpenStax is working with them, telling them, look, the faculty are adopting these open access textbooks. If you still want a portion of that profit that you used to gain, work with us and help us provide the online resources that the faculty need. The other thing that you need, and those of you that are not working one-on-one with faculty may not know, but for those of us that work with faculty all the time or are faculty, you better have the PowerPoints. OpenStax has the PowerPoints, right? And you better have a solution manager for the students, because if you don't have a solution manager for the students, your evaluations at the end of the semester will drop through the floor. So they have both of those, right? There's also a couple of innovators, and this one I'll point up here, but I also should point out that they're being sued by almost all major publishers, which is Boundless. I think the only reason they're really being published is they say they can create materials the same as the textbook. But what they're doing is that if you tell them their textbook, they go out there, Wikipedia, Merlot, Connections, they go to the open educational resources and aggregate everything to match that textbook content. So for a student can put in a publisher's, a textbook with the author's name, and they will aggregate all the materials in the same subject areas. Now, the student won't be reading the book. What the student will do is, I need to read the molecular bonding theory. Boom, it's on Wikipedia. Boom, it's from Merlot, right? It's an aggregator. This way it kind of brings everything together. The last 2 is really a creation and assembly. We're getting to the point now where technology, software-based, is really pretty easy. And both of these are Apple, and I know that for those of you that are real open source as well as open access. You know, Apple's not a big open source type people. But they are disruptive. What did they do to the music industry? What have they done to laptops? I mean, I'm not using one, right? What will they be able to do as far as this? If we look at the iBook Author, it's an easy-to-learn platform so faculty can create materials not only in the customized fashion that they want to teach their class, but easily embed interactives, quizzes, mapping, those types of things that add educational value. With the iTunes U, what iTunes U has gone from just a repository to a repository with a structure. So in the iTunes U, it's based around a pedagogical structure that we would see with concepts. And again, do not hit the button or it will. There we go. Okay. All right. So when we look at these aspects, right, we've got a changed environment for open access. It's to the point now that you do not have to be a front runner, drastic innovator to develop your own open educational resources. We are now getting to the point where open access materials and open educational resources are at the point where faculty can actually adopt them without a lot of extra effort. It does take extra effort because, again, the publishers still control the aspects and still have all of the really nice features. But as we see more groups like OpenStax coming online, we'll see more of the type of innovative, true open access solutions that faculty can adopt quickly. And if we look at aggregators, just the fact that they're saying we can replicate what you have by going out and getting it off of free sites, that also has a disruptive. So I'd actually say here on the innovators is I might have should have put disruptors. Because although iBook Author and iTunes U is what we're using right now, I wouldn't be surprised in 2 or 3 years that there's all types of formats that will enable faculty to really create these materials. As Dean Luce pointed out, this is not in a total vacuum. I took over in October as the Executive Director for Center for Teaching Excellence. So what I kind of told you is the passion as an instructor, what led me to this. Nice that I came into the position whenever we had just had a new dean of the university libraries that was very pro-open access. That enabled us, in my Center for Teaching Excellence and the One University, to look at how do we really engage our students' learning and how can we embed open access into that. So if we look at increased value of education, and that's what the One University Digital Initiative at the University of Oklahoma is about. We're going to enhance the in-class experience by engaging students in high-impact learning activities. Well, high-impact learning activities usually takes more time. If you take more time, how do I cover all the content? We do that by enhancing the out-of-class experience by creating high-quality digital content presented in a pedagogically sound fashion. Open access is helping us do this, right? We don't have to create 45 independent videos to replace your lectures in class. We'll use some of the ones from Duke, we'll use some of the ones from Ohio State, and whatever you don't like, we'll create those. And then lower the cost for students. Remember in STEM, access is important. If we have students, 7 out of 10 students choose not to buy a textbook based on cost. So therefore, even though I select the best textbook, the best pedagogically sound textbook, the likelihood is that my students don't have it. And the only students that have it are the students that can afford it. So therefore, let's lower those costs by replacing a high cost list with engaging digital content. What we saw often with the digital content, and even the $90 book, it's still a flat PDF style book. There's no interactives, there's no feedback to the student. Even if the assessment doesn't ever get to the faculty, having a little quiz system built into an ebook enables that student to read a passage, take 2 or 3 real quick questions, and see if they understood that passage. Or, as many of my students do with the iPad that we created for our organic lab manual, the iBook we created for the organic lab manual, is they actually try the quiz and then see if they need to read. But then again, doing the real quick quiz, tells them you need to read. And need to know is a very high motivating factor, and as we know from cognitive science, motivation is one of the largest impacts on student learning. The last part, and this is very important for an R1, infuse the curriculum with research being performed at the University of Oklahoma by our faculty. That's where the cooperation of the open access initiatives with the journals, with the library repository, and with what we're trying to do with course materials really comes together. Now you want to show the students the relevance. You create a course material, or you put a link somewhere that takes them directly into the library to that primary source so they can read it, so that you can talk about it in class. How can you talk about it in class? You find a video that covers that basics, or you create a video, you put that online so they can get it outside of line. They do that, you come to class, we talk about the primary literature, right? The advantage of coming to a research university should be the fact that you are touching the research that's coming on. What we are doing at the University of Oklahoma will be in the educational resources in the future, right? So one of the things about the digital initiative we're trying to push is this. Now, where does the Center of Teaching Excellence play? It really plays a part in lowering that cost. And for faculty, what that cost means is time. For years, the textbook publishers know exactly how to lower that cost. You send somebody to their office. You give them a textbook. You walk them through all of the reasons that textbook is the best textbook, right? You give them the PowerPoints. You give them the ancillaries. You make an online homework system for them. You make it easy daisy, right? You just make it easy for them. One of the roles that the Center for Teaching Excellence is going to try to do to help faculty adopt open access materials or adopt low-cost materials is to try and lower this cost. First, open access publishers, OpenStax does not have an army of book reps that are going to go out and try and sell that. Boundless does not. They have a website. They're not going to have somebody come to your office and tell you or your students about their services. So therefore, we're working with university libraries to locate and select open education resources for faculty. Provide training on methods to adapt, assemble, and create course materials, and increase the faculty awareness to open access materials and benefits of open access for research and teaching. Okay. Rick wanted to make sure that I left plenty of time for a talk, so that's what I had to present. Me as a faculty member, through my career in the classroom, being able to find resources that allowed me to reach my students and give students access to the learning that would help them change their lives, and for my students in South Texas, their families' lives, was very important. Being able to multiply my effort by making open access materials and that then helping students across the U.S. and the world is important. And lowering the burden on our students, the cost burden on our students, specifically when the cost is so high the student has to make a choice whether they should buy that resource or not buy that resource, when faculty know not having that resource is going to decrease their chances of success in our classes. Going with low cost and open access is essential to the future of higher education. With that, I'll step back and take any questions. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
You seem like a fairly innovative, creative teacher. Would you say there are a lot of faculty like you who are willing to spend the time learning how to find and use open access materials, or are you still pretty much in the minority?
I'm a very early adopter. So what I did with the creative materials back in '98 with General Chemistry was very, very early. I did podcast in 2006, which wasn't the first year they really hit, but that's pretty early on. And again, I'm always looking at technology and how technology can increase our students' learning. So I'd say I'm an early adopter. What I've seen since we've done this push with the One University initiative is lots of faculty are open to the idea. And I think what's going to make the difference is that cost, right? If, let's say, there was an open access material that's quality was similar, right, or the better than what the publisher's putting out, the faculty would be interested in it. If that material also came, or we could find all of the ancillaries that make that an easy adoption for the faculty, they're moving in that direction. Right? We had a call for training for iBooks and iTunes U training so that faculty could create their own iBooks or create their own iTunes U courses. We had 36 proposals, and I only gave them a week. So I've been moving very fast. The faculty in here know this. They're like, he puts out a thing and he asks, I want your feedback in a week. That's pretty good. We're at an R1. We're at 36. We're not just hitting those that would consider themselves teaching emphasis faculty on our campus. We're hitting research faculty. And that's really at an early stage in us educating the faculty on open access. So I think that as the bar gets lowered by some of the innovations, as providers like OpenStax come online, I think you're going to see faculty wanting to move that way because faculty want their students to have the educational resources they need to succeed. Okay? The difference is the price. Publishers make it really easy. So again, chemistry, energy of activation is really low. On the open educational resources, let's say through Merlot and through connections, the energy of activation is very high. What some of the new innovations in software and these open access publishers are doing is actually decreasing that so that the faculty can adopt it without that much effort. But right now it's still a lot of effort. But there are faculty moving in that direction. Okay.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring. As from the perspective of a publisher, although we do not publish textbooks, in the event that, say, a faculty member wants to cobble together and create their own textbook and pull journal articles, direct primary research articles, then my question to you is how can we lower your costs or you as in anybody who is interested in doing so? What type of data formats would be most readily accepted with the tools that you're using, online tools, and perhaps is a question better directed to some of the service providers that you pointed out. But in the event that even, say, a faculty member or a researcher has their own web page, just their own web page for the class, and they want to put up educational resources up there, what types of, how can we better provide our content so that it can most easily be pulled in for you?
Yeah. Are you talking formats or are you talking, yeah. The nice thing about most of these, the open access that's really coming out recently is the XML based and that makes it very accessible. Again, since we have to be very careful on, DRC issues and have to be accessible, but it also makes it really easy for faculty to get a hold of and to understand. It also, if it's fully open and a CC BY type license, that enables us to take it directly into several different formats for the faculty to translate it. Now, if we're talking about primary literature that is copyrighted and that needs to be behind the firewall, that's an issue that we're working with the university libraries on to where that could be a seamless thing, where on our LMS they could put in a thing, put in their 4x4 and go directly to that access. But I think currently the practices that most publishers are doing, most of what you're seeing from the open access is they're doing exactly the same thing. Yeah. And what we see with a lot of what will probably be coming out in the next year or two, I'd say, as far as enabling faculty to customize these things, are based around those publishing tools.
Joy Nelson, School of Music at the University of Oklahoma. Much of the reference has been to science, and that's fascinating. But I wonder, I think we have professors in the arts who would be very excited to get on board with this. Is there plans to include us, and how can we become involved?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, our first iBook iTunes U training program, and we're going to have several of these, the feedback was just awesome for the interest in the faculty. Started today, and we have 2 faculty from art and art history in there. We also have an we also have a proposal for music, and they had a conflict with our training, so we're going to get them involved in this summer. I think when we talk about arts, music, and some of those things, there's going to be some copyright issues. And again, that's why I'm glad that Rick is my friend, because we're going to be working with him on that to try and solve some of those questions. But as far as getting y'all involved, it's the same thing. I mean, if you look at the cost, and in fact, understanding music is in our top 20 costs to students. And so getting something like that to more of an open access format, you know, when you aggregate this, that course, Understanding Music, is, I believe, I'm trying to go rough numbers, but I think it's over $150,000 potential cost to our students a year. Where the STEM usually are the ones, and again, I'm a STEM faculty member, and so I'm talking from that standpoint. But from the Center for Teaching Excellence, we're there to help provide some support to, again, lower that energy of activation so that you can adopt these open access materials or create those open access materials or aggregate, and in the case of music, right, aggregate those open educational materials. But yes, we already have some of the fine arts faculty involved, and we're welcome. This is not a STEM-only initiative. I just happen to be a STEM faculty member talking from a STEM perspective today. So.